What's going on, everybody? Kalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a comparison between the Motorola Moto G Pure and the Visible Midnight. So let's get started. Now with the Moto G Pure, we're getting a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. With the Visible Midnight, we're getting a 6.52-inch LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 269, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. So for the most part, these displays are pretty similar, although I would say the Moto G Pure looks a little bit better being an IPS LCD display versus a regular LCD. The brightness is a little bit better. I do have both phones at 100% brightness right now, and you can see the viewing angles with the Moto G Pure are a little bit better, and in general the colors look a little bit brighter and bolder as well. But that being said, for what they are, both displays are pretty good. At 720p, they're not the best out there, but again, considering they're only 720p, the image is decently sharp on both phones. In addition to the quality, the size is pretty good as well. At roughly 6.5 inches for both phones, you're gonna get the benefits of having a larger display. So when you're consuming content like streaming videos, stuff like that, things are gonna be easy to see. And with both phones having 20:9 aspect ratios, the form factors are also gonna be pretty good. So when you're doing stuff in landscape mode like streaming videos, you're gonna get a more immersive experience. In addition to this, with these form factors, when you're reading stuff, you'll be able to fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. So in general, if you're going to be consuming a fair amount of content and you want a more entry-level phone, both of these phones are going to be really good options. But again, I would say being an IPS LCD display as opposed to just a regular LCD, the Moto G Pure is going to be a tiny bit better. Now for storage, both of these phones have 32 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion, which is not really the best. There are definitely several phones out there, maybe a little bit more expensive than these. And in this day and age, with apps, data, and even just the system taking up more and more space, it's always a good idea to have more space than you need, because it's better to have more space and never use it than it is to actually run out. But that being said, if you're not a power user, if you're just a regular user and you just have a few apps and photos and videos, then you should be completely fine, and the microSD card does help too. But if you are more of a power user, you're probably going to want to consider a higher end device with a little bit more storage. Now there's no wireless charging with the Moto G Pure, but surprisingly the Visible Midnight does actually have wireless charging, and not only that, but it does work really well. I'm not quite sure what the wattage is, but since I got this phone around December, I've been using almost exclusively wireless charging to charge it up, and it does really well. It actually charges pretty fast, so I would say the feature works really well. I was kind of surprised to see wireless charging on a phone like the Visible Midnight, because that's usually a feature that's reserved for higher end phones, and very few mid-range and entry-level phones have it. But it's definitely a nice surprise, because when you have wireless charging, it's a real convenient feature, and it can definitely help with cable management. Like for example, if you have a wireless charger on your desk, then you don't need to worry about wires getting everywhere. Now, is it really going to change your entire experience? Probably not. But all the same, it's definitely one of those nicer, more exclusive features that's always nice to see on lower end phones like these. Now for security features, both of these phones do have fingerprint scanners. With the Moto G Pure, it's right here on the back, and with the Visible Midnight, it's right on the power key. And in addition to this, both phones also have Face Unlock, so we're getting two options here to unlock them, which is always nice. But with that being said, let's go ahead and give these fingerprint scanners a try and see how well they work. So starting with the Moto G Pure, there we go, one more time. And there we go, real fast and responsive, no issues here. And now for the Visible Midnight. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see here, both fingerprint scanners are real fast and responsive, no issues here. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Moto G Pure, we got a water drop notch for the front facing camera, and this camera is 5 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a dual camera setup with a 13 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So not the widest variety of features here, but it does work. With the Visible Midnight, we got another water drop notch for the front facing camera, and this camera is 8 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 13 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. Now I would say the Visible Midnight overall does have an advantage when it comes to the camera setup, because while the Moto G Pure isn't really bad, the Visible Midnight does have an ultra wide camera, whereas the Moto G Pure doesn't. And in addition to this, when it comes to photo quality, while the quality of these phones' cameras are not going to be anywhere near the level of something like a flagship phone, or even a mid-range phone for that matter, they are going to take some decent photos. But I would say, again, the Visible Midnight does have an advantage in quality. So if you're going to be taking lots of photos and you want a wider variety of features overall, then the Visible Midnight is probably going to be a better option here. But that being said, if you're a more casual camera user and you just want a few photos here and there, then the Moto G Pure is going to be perfectly fine. For video, these phones are really nothing special, both of them capping out at 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, and the quality is pretty much exactly what you would expect from phones like these. So if you're recording videos for something like Snapchat where the quality doesn't really matter, then they'll be perfectly fine. But if it's videos you want to keep for something, then I would consider looking at a higher end device that takes better videos. Now internally with the Moto G Pure, we're getting 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G25 processor. With the Visible Midnight, we're getting 3GB of RAM as well with the MediaTek Helio P22 processor. Now I ran Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones, and with the Moto G Pure, we got a single core score of 133 and a multi-core score of 476. With the Visible Midnight, we got a single core score of 147 and a multi-core score of 820. So as you can see, the Visible Midnight is clearly much faster than the Moto G Pure. As far as performance goes, if you're planning on doing higher end activities, like mobile gaming for example, or if you're just going to be on your phone a lot, neither of these phones is really going to be the best. There are definitely better options out there, even if you want to go more towards the lower end. But that being said, the Visible Midnight is going to be much faster, and when you're using your phone, you are going to see the difference. With the Moto G Pure, this phone is really just going to be for basic activities, like sending text messages, making calls, some light web browsing and social media use, and maybe streaming a few videos here and there, but really not that much else. Whereas with the Visible Midnight, while this is nowhere near the level of something like a $1,000 phone for example, it's still going to be much faster than the Moto G Pure. So if you're going to be on your phone a little bit more, if you're going to be browsing the web, using social media, that kind of stuff, then I would say the Visible Midnight is going to be a better option overall. Now both of these phones have 4,000 mAh batteries that support 10 watt fast charging, and while they're not the biggest batteries you can get, they're definitely not bad by any means, and for really low end entry level phones, you're going to get a decent amount of battery life. And with the fast charging, this does help too, so if you have a strong fast charger, these phones are going to charge up of course a little bit faster than ones that don't support fast charging, so if you're on the go a lot and you're not always around a charger, this can save you a bit of time. Now unfortunately, neither of these phones have NFC, so if you want to use contactless mobile payment services like Google Pay, you won't be able to on these phones, so if that is a feature that's important to you, definitely keep this in mind. Now as far as software goes, both of these phones are on Android 11, and while it might not be impossible for them to get an update in the future, I seriously doubt it's going to happen. So if you are concerned with getting the newest Android as it comes out, then you might want to look for a different device, because of course we are on Android 12 right now, and we've been for a little while, and again, these phones both have Android 11. But that being said, if you're not concerned with getting the newest Android, I wouldn't say the software on these phones is bad, because Android 11 does run pretty well on both of these phones, and in general, it is pretty well optimized. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, I would say the Visible Midnight is going to be the better device here, because not only does it have more processing power, by quite a bit actually, but it also has a better camera setup with more features that can just take better pictures overall. But that being said, the Moto G Pure, despite having a huge disadvantage when it comes to processing power, isn't really that far behind, and I do think the display looks a little bit better, so if you're going to be doing some more simple content consumption, like maybe watching YouTube videos, something like that, then the Moto G Pure might be a better option. But honestly, if you're going to be on your phone a lot, the Visible Midnight has such an advantage in processing power, it's probably still going to be a better choice. Now, if you want to learn more about either of them individually, be sure to check out my full reviews and tips and tricks videos for them on the channel. But I hope you enjoyed this comparison, and I hope you found the information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. But as always, I will see you in the next video.